Have you ever thought, why don't they teach that in school? As a teacher of 23 years myself, I noticed that students had less and less of some of the basic skills they needed for everyday life. You know, things like how to write a thank you note, how to make a phone call, how to apologize, how to write a check and balance your account, how to sew on a button, how to clean the bathroom and vacuum and do laundry, how to operate a fire extinguisher, how to turn off the water to the house. And thus, Adulting 101 was born. You can go to jamesdevine.net, click on the Adulting 101 course link, and take a view of a few free lessons. And if you like what you see, sign up for the full course, and you can get 30% off as a Cool Grandpa listener. Just enter the code COOLGRANDPA at checkout.
Hey folks, I want to talk to you about this application Readio. I strongly recommend Readio to help grandparents and parents read to their grandchildren remotely when they can't be in the same room. Whether you're living across the country, across the world, or you're just gone on a business trip, Readio makes it easy for you to read to those young ones when you're away. It's a super easy tool that allows for video monitoring across the top of the screen so they can see you and you can see them, as well as having the book prominently displayed, making it easy for you to read to those young ones, or better yet, having them read to you. What I want you guys to do is go to cool-grandpa.us, look for the affiliate link for Readio, click on that link, and sign up today for your free trial. Hello, and welcome to the Cool Grandpa Podcast. This is your host, Greg Payne, coming at you from Studio 12. This podcast is about being the best possible grandpa you can be, focusing on what it is to be a grandpa and how we can all share that experience together for our grandchildren. Hi, and welcome back. Today's guest is Dr. Gene Beresin. He is the executive director of the Clay Center for Young Healthy Minds at Massachusetts General Hospital. Gene is a full professor of psychiatry at the Harvard Medical School and senior educator in child and adolescent psychiatry at Massachusetts General Hospital. Gene has been focusing on prevention, early intervention, and treatment of teens and young adults with mental health and emotional issues. Now, Gene is going to be our guest today, and I asked him on here because I want to find out how we as grandparents and people in general, right? You don't necessarily have to be a grandfather, but that's our focus. How we can help our children and young adults that are part of our families or part of our communities work and deal with mental health and emotional issues. You know, what can we do and what are some things that we should say and shouldn't say? And so you're really going to enjoy this conversation with Gene. So without further ado, let's get on with it. Hi, Gene, and welcome to the Cool Grandpa Podcast. I sure do appreciate you taking time out of your day to talk to us about this very important topic of adolescent and child mental health issues that grandpas can help address.
I'm happy to be here. As a grandfather of 7 and one coming, it's near and dear to my heart.
Well, and that is something, too, that I love talking about is not only this topic we have, but also the connection of being a grandfather together. This is going to be fantastic.
Yeah.
Now, one thing I do ask all the grandfathers about is what was your reaction to the first time where you had the news broken to you that you were going to become a grandfather?
Well, it was exciting, but I got to say, the first 2 fraternal twins who are now going to be 12 in August, my daughter's water broke at 26 weeks, so they were born at 27 weeks, and they spent 3 months in the newborn intensive care unit. So it was both exciting, but it was incredibly scary because having started out in pediatrics and having seen a lot of disasters, kids born at that age are at risk. They've turned out to be exceptional. Thank goodness for modern medicine. But it was exciting, but scary.
I think for all of us, we've all got different reactions of when we hear the news, and then also during the birth and delivery of those first grandchildren. And I know for myself, I felt a little bit of, wait a second, I'm too young for this. I think we all have images of our grandfathers in our minds that are probably not the image they were when we were born, but images that we have when we were already 12 years old or older, right? So they're already, I just felt personally that, wait a second, I don't have the weather-beaten face and all the gray hair and and the hitch in my step and all of that. I can't possibly be a grandfather.
Yeah. Well, it's an exciting experience, and it doesn't matter how old you are. I think for the kids, we're all old.
Right.
Yeah, and experienced, and I think they view grandparents in a different way than their own parents. Kids are naturally attracted to family and family narratives and family connections, and so I think grandparents play a super important role in their lives.
I do too. And part of what I've been going through with this exploration a little bit is also the idea that to a lot of children, the grandfather can be almost a hero role. And not that the fathers can't, but fathers are oftentimes in the day-to-day activity. And kids learn early how to push buttons and get dad upset and do things. Where with grandfathers, there's a little bit more because of that distance of age, where we get to be a little bit more of a hero, at least for a longer period of time.
Well, there's a distance of age, and there's also the distance of not setting limits and being the disciplinarian on a day-to-day basis. So we have kind of more of an outside role, and they look to us for different things. I mean, we're not the ones to tell them to brush their teeth or go to bed or do your homework. So they do see us in a different way. We get a chance to spoil them, but we also get a chance to kind of introduce them to things that are different and sometimes quite special compared to their parents.
Oh, absolutely. Some of the stories that I've been able to capture from adult grandchildren when they're thinking back in terms of when they were 10 years old or 12 years old or whatnot is when they had precious moments sitting by a stream fishing with their grandfather. Yeah. And sometimes there was conversation involved and sometimes there wasn't. It was just being in the presence of each other.
Yeah.
And then also being able to talk about how grandfathers can expose grandchildren to new and different things in this world, right? That there's a patience and an educational component that maybe the children will be a little bit more patient to let it unfold versus if it was their parents sharing that experience.
Yeah, I totally agree. And they look up to us. They are inspired by us. And we can provide them with experiences that are unique. So, for example, I as a musician, I expose my grandchildren to all sorts of new music, and play the piano or play the guitar, and sing with them, and let them play with me. So that's one thing. I expose them. Most of my kids are very limited in screen time because the parents are very respectful and understanding of the digital media and its dangers as well as its benefits. But I get to kind of show them nature shows because I'm interested in the animal kingdom. And I show them. I think I was the first one to show each of the grandchildren Mr. Rogers. Wow, I mean,
Yeah.
unbelievable. And I remember as a parent kind of rolling my eyes and not really kind of getting it the same way I get it now.
Right. Right.
And Sesame Street, so and other things like Betty Boop.
Hmm.
I mean, 1932, Max Fleischer. I mean, what a chance to show a young, grandchild something completely unusual, remarkable, safe, and funny. So I could go on, but I mean, it's you know, I think they see me as providing unusual, new, innovative experiences.
Oh, absolutely. I agree with that. And my oldest grandchild is 3 years old. So I've got a little list going in my head of things similar that I want to expose them to, whether it's music or even movies. Like, I can't wait until I can sit down and show Lawrence of Arabia to my grandson when he's old enough to appreciate it and soak it in and go, hey, this is, here's a piece of art and entertainment and all of this. And I think probably we both would get that sense of the enjoyment of watching them discover something for the first time when they're watching Betty Boop for the first time. It's like, it's black and white, it's hand-drawn animation, but man, this is cool. They start to get into it, and I think that gives us some joy as well.
It does. It does.
Now, one of the things that I wanted to get into with you is talking about mental health issues with the grandchildren and in children's age, from your experience with the Clay Center, because I think it's important that grandfathers can play a supportive role with the grandchild if they're going through something of a mental health issue or crisis, as well as supporting the family. But maybe we don't always have the tools or the vocabulary to be able to help them out. And so are there any ideas that you have or things that you've seen where grandfathers can help with identifying some behaviors that maybe they can bring up to the parents, because maybe the parents don't see it because they're in a day-to-day situation with the child?
Well, I think there's a number of issues here. First of all, I think all grandparents need to know something about, what are the child's strengths and weaknesses? Do they have any specific disorders or problems or challenges that they're struggling with? I mean, these are topics that don't often come up in families. I mean, there's a huge stigma to mental illness or mental challenges, but we need to know. We need to know something about their experiences with trauma. We need to know something about their experiences with learning problems. We need to know something about their experiences with bullying. We also need to know their strengths: reading, video games, music. So I think, but getting a picture of what the parents and teachers have seen helps us take our own, view of them. So then once we're with them and we know something about their background, we can kind of take a fresh look. So that's number one. Number two, I think it's important for grandfathers to know something about what to look for. I mean, at the Clay Center, we say what's important for all caregivers is what to look for, when to worry, and what to do. and there are trusted places to go. Like, one of the things I'm proud of is that we've produced 400 vlogs. We're in our 4th season of podcasts, and we have films and videos. We have tons of material. And there are other sites, whether it's the American Academy of Pediatrics or the American Academy of Child and Adolescent Psychiatry or the National Alliance for the Mentally Ill. the CDC. There are trusted places you can go for information. If you know that your grandchild has a certain kind of problem, you can look it up. But I wouldn't just do a random Google search. I would look for a trusted site and get some good sound information so that you kind of know what to look for. And then, you're with them in kind of an unfettered space. You're with them in a special place. You're not in the day-to-day life with them. So you have a chance to kind of take them for a walk or take them out for ice cream or, sit down with them and have a conversation or watch a show with them. And then with knowing their baseline from the parents, or at least what the parents have perceived, knowing what some of the things to look for that you get from online trusted sites, and then your own personal experience of an interaction, you can actually provide a new lens, a new view for the parents and support them or give them some of your observations. And you can also determine, you can make some interventions of your own as a grandparent. I think that we have an opportunity to help the kids if they're having a problem of one kind or another, with the permission, of course, of the parents, and make a difference in their lives.
What struck me is at the core of what you were saying and what I was hearing was the communication between the parents and the grandparents. That, as much time as we want to keep and have a natural tendency, especially in our cultures, to keep discussions of mental illness very close, that in fact opening up to the grandparents and even asking them for a second set of eyes on something. Because a lot of times I think parents sometimes want to deny a little bit of what's going on, or sometimes are questioning, is this just a phase? Because I've had and you probably had this experience as well, when talking with your children about the grandchildren going into the terrible twos and the 3-year-olds and different phases where it's almost like, oh, the third birthday's coming up. Prepare yourselves to be tested like you haven't been tested before. So there's a little bit of that wisdom of having us go through that season of being a parent to provide that insight and go, hold on, they're okay. They're just testing boundaries. They're changing. Their worldview is expanding, and these are some of the natural outcomes of that.
Right. So that goes under the category of, when to worry. Is this a phase that's normal in development, or is this an indication of a risk factor? And time will tell, but kids do go through phases, and we've had the experience to know that. There's another thing that I think we can do. Mental health and mental illness have been so highly stigmatized over the years, and differently in different cultures. But it's so common. What's so paradoxical about this is that 1 in 4 individuals will have a psychiatric mental health problem during the course of their life. 1 in 4. It's more common than strep throat.
Right.
And yet, it is, on almost every news channel, there's a health beat. There's not a mental health beat. There should be. One of the silver linings of COVID, COVID has been devastating for youth. About a 60% increase in depression, stress, anxiety, loneliness, which actually began before COVID. So the trend was increasing for multiple reasons. But if there's any, I can't say good news, but if there's any enlightening news, it's that mental health is on the front burner. From the Olympics that we're hearing right now to the challenges that veterans are having coming home with PTSD, to the issue of gun control and gun violence, to climate change, to some of the issues that do impact mental illness. Mental illness is right, and mental health and well-being and preventing mental illness is right on the front burner. And I want to focus on prevention because what is, the scary news is that 1 in 4 will have a mental health problem. And interestingly, 50% begin before age 14 and 75% begin before age 26. So the younger we start, the more likely we are to prevent things from happening or to catch things early and to do some interventions that can really be helped. And to know that remediation, that treatment, that intervention really works. It works about as good as anything in medicine, which is another myth, is that, if you got a mental health problem, you're done. Well, you're not. I mean, we've got a pretty good track record of interventions. But if there's any silver lining to this COVID pandemic, it's that that mental health issues are front and center. And you can't turn on the radio or your smartphone or your computer or your app or your radio without hearing something about mental health, and, and mental illness. And the flip side of that coin is well-being, is that we can take a vital role in helping to maintain well-being in our grandchildren. Whether it's meditating with them, whether it's doing cognitive behavior therapy with them as a game, whether it's listening to music and relaxing with them, or taking a walk out in nature and shutting off the cell phone, or whether it's just playing. Playing is incredibly rejuvenating and healthy for everybody. So there's so many things that we can do to help well-being. And as grandparents, what's fascinating is we have a certain amount of authority.
Right.
Don't you agree with your grandchildren?
Absolutely. It's authority earned and authority given, right? It's earned from our status of being somewhat older, larger physically, some of those things that younger children look at or defer to, but then also it's something that they give to us based on our interactions with them.
Yes. And the other thing is that this is true for most communities. The elders are the bearers of family narratives, and kids love family stories and family narratives. I mean, not just kids. I mean, if you think about all of the important spiritual works, whether it's the Bible, the Quran, the Torah, the Tao, they're all based on narratives, and grandparents are the keeper of narratives. Because I remember my mom, who passed at 102. My children used to love hearing stories of the Great Depression. She was born in 1916,
right?
And the struggles she had. She was a concert pianist, and she would play in department stores for change to help support the family. They loved hearing those stories. They loved hearing the stories of my dad, who was a veteran of World War II, of what the war was about and what the post-war was about, and the challenges they went through. But those kinds of, and we have our own narratives,
sure,
of challenges that we've gone through. They really love hearing our own stories, and especially stories of overcoming obstacles, of meeting challenges, of of dealing with adversity, but also joyous stories of the kinds of fun we've had in our lives and what they can look forward to.
Oh, absolutely. And I think too is that it struck me a little bit where sometimes, and I go back to this heroes metaphor sometimes, is that so in our own lives when we overcome things, we get and it may be we get a term paper in right before the deadline that we've been racking our brains on. And, it could be something as simple as that. It doesn't have to be lifting a car off of somebody but these different part of that hero story is also the rewards that come back to the community or come back to the family. And what does that provide for them? And in cases of the stories and the things that grandparents can tell, it's how we overcame these things and how we can inspire grandchildren and children to go through difficult times and let them know that they can make it through challenging times.
Yeah, and that's where seniority makes a difference, because we're older, we've experienced more in life, and we can kind of we have that kind of authority to kind of an experience that I think that they naturally respect, just as they love hearing stories from older siblings, or their or from their parents. But I think grandparents, have a special place as storytellers.
They do, and I encourage people to embrace that, because it's, to me, it's part of. I listened to one of your other interviews, but it was where you were talking about connections and the importance of trust and openness, honesty, empathy, and building that connection. And that's where those stories come from. So when you're taking a grandchild on a walk, and they could be 4 or 5 years old, you don't have to tell them anything super complex, but they can get and they can understand that sometimes grandpa did things that were hard and difficult, or especially when they're having a challenge, and it could be a small physical challenge. They're trying to climb up the slide and they're struggling a little bit, and we can be encouraging in that way for them to overcome that obstacle. And that can also be something that bleeds over, I think, into the mental health world as well, is that there's feelings of anxiety or situational depression that if we have that connectedness, that we can help encourage and we can listen and we can help guide them through that. We can't take them out of what they're experiencing so much as help guide them through it, I think.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that whole idea of making connections, because even though we come with a certain amount of specialness, authority, seniority, call it what you like, we have to get to know them as individuals, and asking them what they're interested in, asking them to tell you what their favorite books are, asking them about what they really love, or asking them to draw you a picture and show you what they can do. Learning who they are and taking an active interest in who they are, which builds a connection, which builds admiration, which builds trust, which builds knowledge of who they are. It forms an attachment. And that becomes essential, especially if they're going to reveal some of their mental health challenges to us. They got to trust us first. I mean, we don't come trusted out of the blue. We come out of the blue as the senior authority figures who don't set the rules like the parents do. But we're not necessarily, trusted with their inner lives, their inner world, until they really get to know us and we get to know them.
Well, and I think that's important to call out too, is because as grandparents, we have to really work on that connection, especially if we live any kind of a distance away. It's one thing if everybody's over together for Sunday meals, but if you're 1,000 miles away from each other. Some of this is using the technology, but being intentional as a grandparent to be calling, to be reaching out, to even
Yes.
writing letters.
Right. Absolutely. I resonate with the digital media side of it because, I FaceTime with my one and, like my 1 year old and my daughter, my daughter has a 1 year old and a 4 year old. And we FaceTime almost every day. And for the 1 year old, it's unbelievable. I mean, she knows how to play peekaboo by dropping the phone down and, like, where's Kappa? She calls me Kappa. Where's Kappa? And there he is. And then she puts the phone up. I mean, it's just amazing, the facility with digital media. Now, does it take the place of, holding her and giving her a hug or having her walk over to me? No. But it's another way of making a connection that that has value. I mean, she'll feed me some of her strawberries on the screen. I mean, it's cool. It's really cool.
Yeah. Now, one thing that I wanted to talk about a little bit is I grew up in the 70s and 80s, and mental health and even health in general changes so much. And for me, at that point, I grew up with a certain set of vocabulary and a certain set of diagnosis. We didn't have ADHD. I mean, I was LD, learning disabled.
Yeah.
Whatever that means. I still don't know what that what that means. It was almost like, here's an umbrella diagnosis that we're giving some people that fit these characteristics. And I'm sure now it's more segmented and things would be done, but there's some of that vocabulary and some of those things that grandparents come to. And I know we touched on a little bit about going to CDC and American Psychiatric Association, some different things, but what are some of the, verbiage that we need to be very careful about bringing to children born in the 21st century?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. Well, I'm a little older than you. I grew up in the 50s and 60s, and believe me, the terminology was even far worse back then. It was non-existent. I think. I mean, look, I've been a physician, for a long time, and I've been in practice for over 40 years. But I can tell you, a label is just a label. All learning disabilities, all lack of attention is not ADHD. It's kind of like in pediatrics. We say all that wheezes is not asthma. There's lots of different reasons for lack of attention. So I'm a huge fan of learning what symptoms kids have, what to look for. And so if a kid is distractible, if the kid is, procrastinates, if the kid doesn't, has, so let's call it executive functioning problems, which means they don't make priorities, they don't set goals, they forget things, they have time with setting priorities, with doing time management. They're the ones that they try to do their term papers at the night before. They forget things. Now, they may have ADHD, but ADHD is just a label. And all kids with ADHD are different because they have different other strengths and weaknesses. So I'm not a huge fan of using a label like ADHD. Or let's even say depression. I mean, I do think depression is real, but there is a biological, but for every medical and psychiatric problem, there is a biological component, there is a psychological component, and there's an environmental, interpersonal component. And they're all integrated. And how they relate to each other and how they reinforce each other and how they work together for better or worse is really what we need to figure out. So I think what's really important now is learning what are the psychosocial variables. So biologically, what did other family members have in terms of issues, problems with anxiety, depression, learning, behavioral issues, oppositional issues, attachment issues. What are the psychological issues? How have family members and how has the child been in terms of self-esteem, in terms of self-concept, in terms of thinking positively or negatively, in terms of being an optimist or a pessimist, extroverted, introverted, shy, outgoing. What is their psychology? Is the glass, again, to use common terminology, is the glass half empty or is the glass half full? It seems pretty simple, but it makes a huge difference to know that about a kid. And then from the environment, do they have adequate resources? Do they have food insecurity? Do they live in a safe neighborhood? Do they, what's the family like? Is there conflict? Is there unresolved conflict? Has there been a history of trauma or abuse or neglect for various reasons? Not to cast judgment. Has there been divorce? Has there been, adversity? Has there been medical illnesses, that the family has had to endure? So you gotta, I think about it in terms of all the variables that occur biologically, psychologically, environmentally, and what we're trained to do as child and adolescent psychiatrists is kind of like help put those pieces together with the help of the parents and the grandparents and the siblings and the teachers and the spiritual leaders if they're a part of the life of the family, and figure out what's going on. It's not, as I say to most families, this is not a solo pilot operation, and it's not, that means the doctor is not the solo pilot, nor are you as the parent. And it's not a sprint, it's a marathon, because things evolve, things change. But I think knowing those variables of adverse childhood experiences, for example, knowing histories of trauma, knowing histories of, say, bullying, knowing if the child has had trouble with dyslexia, with reading, with, understanding certain things, with processing information efficiently, getting some testing done around that. It's all data that we put together in a way to come up with a profile of a kid. And grandparents can certainly be a part of this, and should be, I think. So I hope that answers your question about, what we know now that we didn't really know as well back in the 60s and 70s and 80s. Because I don't think I think we didn't realize how both complex the human brain and behavior is. And I also think we didn't realize how much we can do to prevent hardship and to make things better.
No, you absolutely did answer the question, and it's, I think, so refreshing to hear from experts that it's a holistic issue. It's not where, when I was growing up and when you were growing up, I think we were coming out of, vitamins had only been discovered what, in 1920s or something like that. So the idea of in science, in psychiatry and things of here's a label, here's a fix, put them together is going very much away that it's a holistic approach. It is what's going on biologically, what's going on situationally at school, at home, and then some of the other factors that are in play in this. So, I think encouraging for me is to let go of trying to use labels where labels don't really apply anymore. And as grandparents, I think it's important for us to remember to think holistically and that we're part of that.
Right. Right. I totally agree. I mean, especially when it comes to mental health, because, I mean, this applies to all medical illnesses. I mean, if you have high blood pressure, it's not just that it's inherited or that you've had too much red meat in your life. And you've got hardening of the arteries. I mean, we have to take into account your diet, your exercise, your stress, a whole variety of things, and put it together. And I think that it's probably more true for mental health. But just as you were saying, holistic. I mean, all of my patients learn meditation, learn cognitive behavior therapy, or how to modify your thoughts to kind of bring them down to a realistic level. They all, I pay attention to diet, to sleep, to exercise, to supplements that may help them, which could include vitamins. So you're right. I think the evolution of this is that it may seem like it may seem too complex, but look, I mean, that's the story of our lives. It's not simple. It's not like, I grew up in such and such a neighborhood and therefore I've experienced one specific kind of trauma. I mean, it just doesn't happen that way.
I think too is that if we look at this as being an holistic issue with mental health for our grandchildren, then I feel like as a grandfather and grandparent, it's our obligation to step into that role. And it's almost a little bit, and I'm using these analogies, right, to be, the old guy that the hero, in this case, the grandchild, meets along the way, that starts to put some, share a little wisdom, share little things about, hey, you know what? 6th grade is going to be absolutely miserable. It's your first year in middle school. You got 8th graders that are going to be thinking they're kings of the world until they get to 9th grade, and they're freshmen.
Bottom of the heap.
Right. And there's that little bit of stepping into that old man, white robe, white beard role of saying, hey, we can help guide you through this. We can't necessarily make it easier, but we can help move you through this period. And
exactly. They love to hear stories of like, well, when I went into 9th grade, boom, 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 and then I thought that I was top of the heap when I was a senior, and then I went to college, and like, holy mackerel, I was like a fish out of water. I had no idea what was going on. So, they really appreciate hearing that from stories like that from us. And even though their lives may be very different, there are certain ways that they can kind of have hope and maintain a positive attitude and take on challenges. And, if we make a good relationship with them, hopefully they'll come to us for advice. That's what we want.
Absolutely. We want that trust and that empathy and those relationships built, and you build them early. That's what you do. FaceTime with a 1.5-year-old who tries to feed you strawberries through the smartphone.
Right. And then hopefully when she's like 18 and she's starting college, she'll give me a call and say, hey, Kappa, what did what do I do? I mean, hopefully she'll certainly ask her parents, but she'll get other points of view,
Right.
and I think it's great to have for kids to have to have multiple people in their family to go to, and grandparents hold kind of a special place in that network.
Absolutely. And if you're intentional about building that relationship, you're going to be rewarded later on when you do get that call from the 18-year-old that's asking you for some advice, because they know what their parents are going to say at that point, but they don't know necessarily what grandfather's going to say.
Right, right, right. And we want them to learn to use the resources around them just in life. Like we want adults to use multiple resources. So we want them to get advice from multiple resources with people they trust, and hopefully as grandfathers will be key players in that world.
So, Gene, as we wrap up here, is there any topic or anything that I haven't asked you about or we haven't discussed that you feel is important for grandfathers to understand and know about in terms of mental health with their grandchildren?
Well, there's one that you haven't mentioned that I think is going to be variable depending on the grandfather, but whether or not we should be telling them, if we have our own mental health challenges, whether we should tell them our own stories. We certainly should tell them stories about school and sports and nature and how we grew up and all of that. But self revelation about our own mental health challenges, I personally think we should. I personally think, they know if we have asthma. They know if we have diabetes. They know if we have an autoimmune illness. We don't hesitate to tell them, like, I have an autoimmune illness. I'm not going to be able to go swimming this summer on vacation. Okay, well, they'll know that. But if I struggled with depression or anxiety or obsessive compulsive disorder, or if I had a learning disability, what's the harm in you, for example, saying, I had some learning problems and school was really tough for me. And here's how it was tough, And then you could explain what you went through and how you dealt with the challenge, how it affected your self-esteem, how it affected your ability to perform, what you had to go through to kind of overcome that. I think for kids that have mental health challenges, it's very helpful to be transparent. There's nothing to lose. There's nothing to lose. And for the kids to be able to tell their parents and grandparents about their own mental, because it models for them what they should be able to do with their adults, with their teachers, with their spiritual leaders, with their, with their parents and grandparents, and open it up. If they're feeling, God forbid, suicidal, I want them to be able to say that to us. I'm feeling so down and helpless. I really want to throw in the towel. Well, the Youth Risk Behavior Survey, which is done by the CDC, 20,000 kids, ninth grade through 12, every 2 years, they ask about seriously, considering suicide. Well, it's been fairly stable at 17 to 19% for the last 25 years. That's a lot of kids thinking about suicide. Now, fortunately, 17 to 19% don't actually do anything, but it's so valuable to talk about it. Why should we be ashamed? Why should we hide it? Why shouldn't we discuss it? And I think that That's the only thing that I would add to this conversation, that to normalize a mental health problem the way we normalize asthma, or you know, or you know, I have knee replacements. I used to be a sprinter. I'm not running anymore. But when my grandchildren say to me, "Hey, Grandpa, let's have a race," sorry,
Right.
I'm not running across the grass. Okay, what? Wait, what? How? Because I had knee replacements and my knees are not so good. So let's do something else. Let's ride the bike. Fine, we'll do that. We'll go bike riding. I think mental health issues should be on the same level as that. I and by setting an example of normalizing it, everybody gets depressed if they have a breakup in a relationship. If you don't, there's something wrong with you.
Yes.
So, maybe they should hear about how we reacted when we had breakups in relationships, or if we got bullied. So I think that's the only thing that I would add to this conversation, that we can model for them. And if they trust us, if they respect us, if they value us as people to look up to, and we say, I've had my own struggles with depression. Let me tell you about it. Holy mackerel, is that powerful?
Yeah, they're not feeling alone or different, or the shame around it that
Right.
I'm not as happy as everybody else, so there's something wrong.
And there are times where, and I think you made the right word. It's shame. It's that to express your own issues and problems, whether they're medical or psychiatric or whatever, helps reduce the shame and helps just tell it like it is. And so here's the issue, here's the problem, here's what I've struggled with, and here's how I got help, and here's how I don't have to be ashamed to say that, this is what I've been through. And then you kind of give them a template, a model for them to be able to do that.
Yeah, that's powerful stuff. The thing that is also there too is, I think that ability, it goes even deeper to be able to help them and walk them through situational issues that they're going through. Because
I could tell you, the more we do that, the more we have conversations about that, the more likely a kid who's really at whatever age, generally school age or teenager, young adult, that's struggling in real trouble, whether it's with substances or with suicidal thinking or serious depression, is not going to hide it, is going to come out and say, I need to talk with you. Whether it's the parent or the sibling or the grandparent. And for far too long have mental health issues been so stigmatized and so taboo to talk about that they've been hidden until they get so severe that that some bad things can happen. And we don't want that. We don't want to let it get to that place.
no, absolutely not. We want this next generation to have it a little better than what we had it.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
I mean, I think, for example, the Olympic athletes who've expressed their mental health problems, I mean, geez, being an Olympic athlete, I mean, that alone is so stressful and so fraught with anxiety and depression. But for them to be able to express, this is the first time, frankly, I think ever, that I've ever heard of Olympic athletes talking about their mental health issues in a public forum. And you know something? They're not disrespected for it. They're not seen as weak or as inferior. They're seen as courageous, I think. They're seen as they're role models for our kids. So, I think it's sad and it's distressing for everything they put in, but geez, what courage. What
Yeah.
what an example for our kids,
Well, and
It's great.
And also it's courageous in the sense too of we need to re-examine our programs and our priorities with those young
Exactly.
people, because
Yep.
what may be leading to that in the training regimen and the stress that's going on that the Olympic sport is putting onto them.
Yes.
Inadvertently, in a lot of cases, it's just knowing that, hey, to beat the Russians, going back to our generation, to beat the East Germans, this is what you got to do. We're training 18 hours a day, and then, here's the regimen. And what does that do to somebody mentally?
And they're also getting role models from athletes like NBA athletes like Kevin Love talking about his panic attacks, and other superstars talking about their mental health issues. I mean, it's good news. It's good news, and it does help us be aware of the stresses and strains and change programs, just as you suggest.
Gene, thank you so much for being on the Cool Grandpa podcast. This has been an incredible conversation for me, and I know it's going to help other grandfathers, parents, and families out there when they hear this.
Well, I'm delighted that you invited me, and I hope my grandchildren listen to it.
Same here. What a cool conversation with Gene. I really enjoyed learning about how, as a grandfather, I can help my grandchildren and other children and young adults that I come in contact with try to communicate about mental health and emotional issues that they may be going through. So please go to the show notes. I've got a number of links with Gene and with the Clay Center, a number of articles. And the Clay Center has a great podcast themselves, a lot of shorter type episodes dealing with mental health issues and emotional health issues with children and young adults. So there's a lot of great information at the Clay Center, as well as information that can help you find resources if you feel like you've got a youth in your family that needs to get in and see somebody, be evaluated. It's a great place to go. They've got a lot of information there. So please check out the show notes and check out the Clay Center links in those show notes. And until next time, remember to stay cool. Thank you for listening to the Cool Grandpa Podcast. If you've enjoyed this episode, please do me a favor and share it with a friend. That's the best way you can help us to expand our community, as well as get the news out about how valuable grandpas are in the lives of those kids. If you'd like to leave me a comment or shoot me a potential topic for this podcast, please go to www.cool-grandpa.us. Look for the comments tab, fill it out, hit submit. It's as easy as that. Until next time, remember to stay cool.